Tunisians vote for their first freely elected president. They choose between a candidate from the old regime and a human rights advocate. So what's at stake in the election? Where might it take Tunisia's transition? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. It's the final step in what's been a long political journey for many Tunisians. On Sunday, up to 5.3 million voters cast their ballots in the presidential runoff. It's the first time since the country's independence from France in 1956 that the president is being directly and freely elected. After President Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali was deposed in the 2011 uprising, Monsef Marzouki took power as interim leader. Now, he's one of the two candidates running for president. The other is Beji Qaid Essebsi. He's 88 years old and a veteran politician who served under the former dictator. Well, today, Tunisia stands at a crossroads between returning to figures from the past or becoming the first Arab Spring country to successfully transition to democracy. Well, the first round of presidential elections took place in November, but none of the candidates secured a majority. Instead, the vote revealed a country politically divided. The north emerged largely in favour of Essebsi and the south favoured Marzouki. Let's take a closer look at what the two candidates represent then. Beji Qaid Essebsi served under former dictator Ben Ali and has been criticised for representing a return to the past. Essebsi leads the secular-leaning Nidat Tunis party, which won a majority in the October parliamentary elections. Monsef Marzouki, on the other hand, well, he's a human rights activist who was forced into exile under the Ben Ali regime. Marzouki campaigns for justice and rejects the past authoritarian government. When it comes to diplomacy, Essebsi favours closer ties with the Egyptian and Syrian regimes, an approach Marzouki disagrees with. Well, of all the Arab Spring countries, Tunisia has come the closest to transitioning to democracies. For countries like Yemen and Syria, of course, things have turned out very differently so far. Here are some of the important events, then, that we should recap in asking what brought Tunisia to where it stands today. Well, dictator Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali fled to Saudi Arabia during a popular uprising in 2011. In December of that year, human rights activist Monsef Marzouki was elected president and Hamadi Jebali of the Ennahda party became prime minister. The assassination of opposition politician Mohamed Brahmi led to new protests in July 2013. Demands mounted for the Ennahda party to step down, though. That same year, in October, Ennahda handed power to a caretaker government to organise new elections in 2014. Well, in January of this year, Parliament passed a new constitution. Then in October, the Nidat Tunis party won a majority in parliamentary elections. And finally, in November, Tunisia held round one of the first free presidential elections since independence. Let's get the thoughts of our guests now. Joining us here in the studio is Amal Boubacar, a non-resident fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. From Tunis, Youssef Sharif, a political analyst and Tunisian blogger. And also joining us from Tunis is Scott Mastick, the Middle East and North Africa Regional Director at the International Republican Institute. Welcome to you all. Amal, let me start with you here in the studio. How crucial is this election to Tunisia's political transition?
Well, actually, there are different feelings about how crucial it is.
What's your feeling?
Well, let me maybe explain that from the external community point of view. It's really about, the consolidation of a process between the Islamists and secular actors. The way they have supposedly tamed their ideological conflicts is giving birth to a new democracy. From inside Tunisia, Tunisians are a bit more cautious. For some, it's a counter-revolution that is underway. For some, it's on the contrary, the consolidation of a transition processes. So actually, these divides and these conflicting interpretations have their roots right after what happened right after the revolution.
Because the different visions for the country and what needs to be done.
Different understanding on what the revolution meant. Just after the revolution, you had, for example, political parties such as Jazeera who will later found Nida Tunis and Nahda, and also the left, who thought that it was really about filling the vacuum, controlling the political sphere and the institutional process. For the young revolutionaries, it was much more about erecting new institutions, about having social justice, decentralization of political and economic freedom. And for the majority of society, it was about, getting rid of the dictator, but then get back to the normal and continuing to have, the country functioning pretty much on the same lines. So the problem is that actually it was quite normal to have the elections as the first goal of this transition for the past 4 years, but it has not solved the conflicts and the dividing views of what really the transition should be and what the revolution meant for all the Tunisians. It's just the beginning.
It's just a process, right? And let's not forget the president, according to the new constitution, is no ceremonial figure, right? He sets policy in very key and sensitive areas, just to put this in the right context.
Well, it's going to be a bit complex than that, because a bit more complex than that, because actually it's going to depend on how Nida will have all the power in its hands. And
if they win, of course.
If they win, of course. And how Nahda, which is actually the other major actor, react. Will they stay in the opposition? The four past years,
or a unity government. And,
in the name of the consensus and compromise for national unity, a lot of consensus between these two actors have been going on, but actually, again, without solving the real conflicts and real issues that Tunisia has been through and that will be important for Tunisia's future.
Right. So clearly a lot potentially riding here on the election. An important moment, perhaps, in the country's political transformation. But yet, Yusuf, in Tunis, I understand you're blanking your vote. Why? I mean, how much excitement and confidence is there in the democratic process, Yusuf?
It's not confirmed yet, but yes, that's I think most probably what I will do. But this is I don't feel represented by either candidates, and I think many Tunisians feel the same. In regards of, from one side, you have quite an old figure that not just because he worked with the previous regime, but because of his age. When we talk of a country which is mostly composed of young people, electing an 88 years old man is a little bit out of context. On the other hand, you have a human rights activist, yes, but if he is elected, he faces a lot of opposition from the administration, the bureaucracy. There were a lot of a lot of people call mistakes during his presidency, so a lot of people will refuse to work with him. And so you have from one side, you're electing someone who can bring you back to the ancien regime, and from the other side, you're electing someone who basically cannot do anything and will put the country in a state of
we know what you don't
crisis
want.
And polarization.
What is it that you do want? Do you see an alternative?
Currently not. Currently I don't. Currently I think we have to deal with what is coming, and I mean many people expect that Qaid Sibsi will be the winner. Let's simply hope that the Marzouki and his partisans will accept the results. Let's also hope that if Qaid Sibsi becomes president, we do not see a return of the police state and of dictatorship. But frankly, currently we just have to wait and see. It's too early to do anything, and perhaps also too late to do anything.
Really sad sentence to hear, Scott Mastic, when you hear Tunisians say things like what we just heard Yusuf say there. Let's hope this isn't a return to the old regime, to the dictatorship, at such a potentially important point in the country's political transition. I guess the question, Scott, is while we have some idea of what Marzouki represents, and we know what Ennahda represents because they've been in power, what does Nida Tunis really represent? Do they have an ideology that unites all the different factions?
Yeah, in fact, I think for both of these candidates and the parties that they come from, it's a challenge to identify what, in fact, either one would do specifically in addressing the primary concerns that most Tunisians have. And there's a lot of public opinion research out there, some in fact done by IRI, that suggests that's primarily related to the economy and security. And I don't know that we've heard a lot of specifics from either candidate in this election, but even going back to the parliamentary elections, with the parties competing for parliament, they were light on specifics in terms of what they'd actually do to move the country forward. You know, in many ways, I think that what's at stake here is that this election will end a series of elections that puts into place the first democratically elected government with a full mandate that this country will have going all the way back to the political upheaval of 2011. And that's really important because my sense is most Tunisians want to get on with it in terms of realizing some improvements in the economic realm and their quality of life and life opportunity. And it's hard to do that without a government with a full mandate.
Well, a government with a full mandate may be one thing, Scott, but to what extent does Nidat Tunis and Al-Baji Qaid al-Sabsi, to what extent are they just a front for the old guard and for the old regime, which seems to be a concern for some Tunisians?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key question here. There is uncertainty about what Sabsi would do if he were the president, and at the same time his party ultimately is going to be the lead party in the next coalition government. So certainly the Marzouki campaign has attempted to paint them as a return to the old regime, and I think the truth is we just don't know yet. Whether a leap has been made in terms of the way many individuals in the Nidat Tunis party accept a new democratic paradigm for how they would govern. We just don't know yet because the party hasn't held power before, and Sabsi has not been president. You know, on the flip side, though, I think the biggest challenge that Marzouki has is that he does have a record for the last 3 years in office, and the fact is most Tunisians are not that happy with what happened during the last 3 years. It's one of the reasons that you saw a kind of overturn in who would be running the next government. And again, there's a lot of research out there that reflects the view that Tunisians didn't go into any of these elections in a positive mood.
That does seem to be a good point. We'll pick up on that, but I want to ask Amel, if Sabsi does win this election, you have a party which controls both the legislative, or has the largest share of seats in the legislative branch of government, as well as a president from the party in the executive branch. Are Tunisian institutions of democracy ready for that sort of situation and not fall back into sort of one leader, one party rule?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, there's something that is on the place, and it's called Nahda. And Nahda is still an important actor, actually, despite the fact that they won less seats than the previous elections. So the real question is, will we be able to see a Nahda and Nidé not just coexist, but co-govern or govern together? And we have seen a kind of, I mean, they got closer, and especially because Nahda, as you mentioned, it has accepted, you know, to get integrated and to have this kind of profile to get integrated within the establishments in order to save the party and not to be repressed.
Is that a good thing, or is that does that undermine the idea of a vibrant democracy if the opposition or the largest second party is too close? For
me, that's exactly the crucial question for Tunisia's future. Is an elite pact driven actually enough to consolidate a post-authoritarian democracy? I mean, it's okay because on the short term, it can stabilize the political situation. And we have avoided violence, as for example, we saw it in Egypt, for that specific reason. Right. But in the long term, are they going to be able to face the challenges that are waiting for them? There are actually two kinds of challenges. First, kind of external challenges to Nidé and Nahda. As you said, are they going to be able to govern together? Are they going to tackle issues that are really issues that they have been in conflict on, such as the transitional justice, for example, liberal economic policies? That will be okay because they share somehow the same project, some of the same ideas. But there are also internal challenges. The bases and the grassroots of those parties, and especially of Nahda, but also Nida, because it's not such an heterogeneous party, are actually not that agreeing with what the leaders have decided so far. So those parties are going to face strong and serious challenges about what kind of policies they can put in place
from within their own ranks.
Yeah, and without having strong opposition from within their own ranks. Nida has built all its campaign on the anti-Islamist argument. So how are they going to sell that to their grassroots? How are they going to sell the fact that they need, in any case, to work with Nahda? And on the side of Nahda, there are also generational gap between those who think that it's time, you know, to do reforms and to cut ties with people from the former regimes, and between the much more the positioning of the elite who think, you know, that no, integration is still, and bargain integration, yeah, is still a way to protect themselves from repression, the repression that they have experienced 20 years ago.
It's a very crucial question, isn't it? Finding that balance between harmony at this point and sort of national unity versus making sure your democracy is actually functioning. Let's listen to what people in the capital Tunis had to say about their feelings and expectations from these elections.
I will vote for Mohamed Monsef Marzouki. I believe he is the only one capable of saving Tunisia in the future.
I will vote for Beji Qaid Essebsi, as we have not seen any change for the last 3 years.
I will choose Beji Qaid Essebsi because he is able to make changes. Al-Marzouki was negative during his 3 years in office.
I will vote for Dr. Mohamed Monsef Marzouki. He is the candidate of the revolution. I am sure he will achieve what we have done the revolution for, that is freedom.
So a bit of sentiment from the street there, but Yusuf, one of the figures I was looking at was voter turnout amongst the youth, and it seemed low. Is there a connection there between the sort of results we've been seeing and the sort of candidates that are now available for people to choose from, because the youth are losing interest or faith in the whole process?
To a certain extent, yes, but in the previous round, in the first round, we had 27 candidates. Some of them are younger than these ones. Some of them have discourses that are appealing to the youth, but still, we had a very low turnout. The thing is that the youth in this country were never politicized during Ben Ali. The generation of youth today, which is a generation that was educated under Ben Ali, didn't know politics. They were totally out of the political sphere. They were never interested in politics because of the regime in place. So now, I mean, with the revolution, of course, they became interested to politics, but that was for a few months. And then when the routine established itself with the crisis that started in the country, they just withdrew from politics and you know, returned back to basics. So what we have now is the result of Ben Ali's politics that banned Tunisian youth from politics, and here we see them today very you know, not caring at all about the political situation.
It sounds like almost like a full circle, a cycle here, where, you know, the lack of politicization of the youth is producing a situation in which older elements, and if not the older guard, can dominate the political scene once again. Fascinating. Scott, though, marginalization and disillusionment of the youth was one of the sort of key ingredients in the making of the Tunisian revolution in the first place. If some of these segments, Scott, are now becoming disillusioned once again, does that mean we should expect some level of instability going forward?
I definitely think young people not voting is a big problem here. It's not that uncommon that youth don't vote in elections in democracies. There's a sort of record of hot and cold participation of young people, but the difference here is that young people were central to deposing a dictator, and so if they're not of a mind that this election matters for them and that they don't have a stake in the process, that's a real problem, and I think it's going to be something that the next government is going to have to place high on its agenda in terms of how to reach young people and do some things that young Tunisians feel are directly benefiting them in a way. Because you know, we had observers out here for all of the elections that have occurred so far, and it's obvious that young people weren't voting in any of the elections that have occurred to date, at least this year. I do think young people are more active in the civil society sector, but you know, the process of going to cast a ballot is reflective of the sense that one has, you know, a vested interest in who the candidates are and who is governing them, and you just don't see that here right now with young people.
All right, now Amal, you were angling to get in with a comment there. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from the outside of Tunisia, we are often talking about the danger of instability linked to terrorism, for example, not diminishing the importance of counter-terrorist strategies. There's also something that is much more important in Tunisia and that has been going on for the past 4 years, which are strikes, protests. People are really taking the streets, especially in the deprived regions of Tunisia, in order to ask for the same things for the past 4 years. So as long as institutional representativeness won't be solved, as long as we are focusing only on, you know, getting, again, Islamist and secular actors getting along within the assembly and not talking about the huge dissatisfaction of people who actually do not care about those intra-institutional debates, but who just want, you know, to be heard and to be seen and to be invited to join the policy making process, because for now that didn't happen, and really again the issue of protest, of strikes won't be resolved by the single label or the single issue of compromise and consensus.
Do you see any of the parties speaking for those concerns of the deprived people, which was the basic thing that moved this revolution?
Those regions have largely voted for al-Marzouqi during the first round of the presidential elections. I believe they will do so also tomorrow. But at the same time, as the other guest mentioned, it's really choosing between two restricted choices. Many won't vote at all, but again, the left is somehow quite close from those regions, but the institutional strategies of the left compromising or trying to get close to NIDE has also somehow jeopardized its relationship to the regions. So it's really an open process, and the possibilities of local conflicts and new local demands for new modes of representativeness, people who will say, you do not represent us. I mean, even if you think that it's a success because the Tunisian transition has been consolidated by the elections, we are still not happy and the revolution is still going on.
I'm glad you mentioned the revolution's going on. I want to get Yusuf's thoughts in, and we have just about a minute left here. When you look regionally, Yusuf, you have in the region, you know, a situation in Egypt where critics say there's been a full-on return to authoritarianism. Syria is being crushed by authoritarianism. How important is this moment for deciding the fate of the Arab Spring?
When I look at the region, then I'm optimistic again, and I'm relieved, sadly, for the other countries. Then I look at Tunisia and say it's great around here. Yes, what is happening here will perhaps not affect the other countries straight away, but if we succeed in 5 or 10 years from now, then Tunisia will be really perhaps the locomotive of the region in terms of democratization, respect of human rights, etc. And there is one point I wanted to add. When we speak about Tunisian politics today, let me put it this way: Sibsi is not the Sisi of Tunisia, and Marzouqi is not the Che Guevara of Tunisia neither. So this is not exactly ancien regime versus new regime, counter-revolution versus revolution. It's something in between, and that's why, I mean, especially when I look at the region around, I remain optimistic because hopefully, and again, I use the word hope, we're going towards a consensus, an acceptation by both sides, and we will go on, and the revolution will continue.
Right. Something in between, you say. Let's hope whatever that in between is, it turns out that something that's good for the people of Tunisia and the region. Let's thank our guests, Yusuf Sharif, Scott Mastic and Amal Boubaker. And of course, you can find this show and many more if you head over to our website. That's aljazeera.com. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or contact us on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. I'm Sami Zaidan. Thanks for watching. It's goodbye for now.